If you came here looking for a video that would tell you to do this and do that, and then you will have a perfect saxophone sound, then this is not the video you were looking for. This is going to be an in-depth video about my approach to the saxophone sound. It may or may not work for you, but go listen to my music, and if you like my saxophone sound or if you like parts of it, then watch the video and see if there's some tips here you can pick up and use for yourself. The thing about saxophone sound is that we all have a slightly different approach. Different teachers are going to tell you different things, and they might both be right. And that is why so many people find it hard to get working on your saxophone sound, because there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all embouchure or tongue position. We play different setups, we have different bodies, we play different reed strengths. There are so many variables that the only way you're going to get a good saxophone sound is by putting in the work and experimenting. So why am I making this video then? Well, there are some things that are pretty universally accepted as core elements of a good saxophone sound and embouchure. I'm going to talk about air support, the forming of the embouchure around the mouthpiece, and how to get rid of tension in your embouchure. And finally, tongue position and voicing. Within all these concepts, there are variables, and I'm going to try my best to give you a nuanced approach. Instead of telling you how to form your embouchure or exactly how to position your tongue, I will tell you what works for me and a couple of the variables that you can experiment with on your own to form the saxophone sound that works for you. This means that in order to get something from this video, you must have listened to a lot of saxophone. You have to have an idea of what a good saxophone sound sounds like, so that when you're practicing and you're getting closer to that, you will recognize it, you will recognize what you're doing, and you will keep going in the right direction. Now, this is not a quick fix, but this is the honest video about how to get a good saxophone sound. Now, first up, let's start with the breathing. And this is, I think, pretty universal no matter what kind of saxophone sound you want. First, let's try to take a look at what we want from our airstream. We want to have a lot of capacity to fill up the lungs with a lot of air. But a lot of air on its own is not going to be enough, because we can empty the lungs pretty fast if we try to. So when we're playing the saxophone, it's not about trying to get all the air into the saxophone as quickly as possible. It's about using the least amount of air necessary to produce a good sound. This means that the air needs to be focused. We want the air to go exactly where it's needed and not just overflow. By flexing the stomach muscles, we can push the air out in a steady and focused stream. Now, focusing the air also has a lot to do with tongue positioning, which I will get to later. But to work on your breathing, here are a couple of exercises to help you get the most out of your air and to expand your lung capacity. First up is how to fill your lungs all the way up. Try to breathe in as much air as you possibly can, and then a little more. If you breathe in normally, you're just going to fill the top part of your lungs. But we want the most capacity possible. So breathe in from the bottom and fill your lungs as much as possible. Now, this exercise should help you get a feel for what your lungs are actually capable of. Now, when we're releasing that air, we want to push it out from the stomach. Take a deep breath in and use the sound S as you push the air out. So do this exercise, and when you think you're running out of air, focus on that six-pack. Focus on activating those muscles, and you will actually be able to push out a lot more air than you think. So by working on breathing in and breathing out, you can make a huge difference to your saxophone sound. There is lots more to unpack about breathing, but I want to redirect you to Dave Liebman's video on producing a good saxophone sound if you want to learn more about that. Because Dave Liebman covers it so well, and his video is basically the saxophone sound Bible for me. Alright, so now we're getting into the fun stuff, which is forming of the embouchure around the mouthpiece. Beginners are often told to fold their bottom lip over their teeth to get more control of the reed. But as you're looking to produce a fatter and richer jazz sound, I tend to recommend to keep the lip in a more natural position. Now, there are examples of players playing with the lip a bit more folded in and a bit more folded out that all sound great. This is something you need to experiment with. And I'm not talking experiment with for an hour tomorrow and land on something. As you work on your sound, you're going to fine-tune things like your breathing, your tongue position, and maybe that will change the way your lip position sounds. So your embouchure might change when something else finally clicks into place. And that is why you should just be mentally prepared to work on this stuff for the rest of your life. So keep that in mind as I tell you how I position my embouchure around the mouthpiece. First up, adjust your neck strap so that when you put the saxophone into your mouth, it lands directly below your top teeth. If you're looking like this, pull the strap up. If you're looking like this, pull the strap a bit down. Some people play with a double embouchure, but I'm not going to get into that because it's not that common. So place the top teeth on the top of your mouthpiece and close the rest of your mouth around the mouthpiece without thinking, without putting any pressure anywhere. Now this is what an embouchure without tension feels like. And this is what we should strive to be able to do as we push the air through the mouthpiece. It's taken me years of practice to figure this out, but I've had 3 main parts of my embouchure where I've had tension that I had to get rid of. And I think this is applicable to a lot of saxophone players. The first place where I think a lot of people have tension is the corners of the mouth. If you find that you're smiling when you're playing, like pulling the corners of the mouth up, this will put tension on the sides of the reed, which makes it vibrate less. We want to keep the reed in a straight horizontal position, and this is achievable by relaxing the corners into more of a frown. A great exercise to make sure you relax the corners of your embouchure is to place your fingers inside the corners and play with your fingers there. Play like this for like 10 minutes, and then as you remove them, you will feel that a lot of that tension has gone. If you work on this consistently, you will be able to get rid of that tension permanently. Now the next part of the embouchure where I've had to work on getting rid of the tension is the upper lip. Now I haven't made this a science, but I'm imagining that just tension here on its own is not going to do too much to your sound, but the tension here might transfer to other parts of your cavity and embouchure. So good idea to get rid of tension anyway. And to get rid of this tension, I've used this exercise. Both of these exercises come from the Dave Liebman video, and I think he got them from Joe Allard. And for this exercise, I want you to lift your top lip off of the mouthpiece as you're playing. If you have a focused airstream, you should be able to produce a sound without the top lip touching the mouthpiece. Now, hopefully doing this a little bit every day will help you get rid of that tension. Now, the final part of the tension puzzle for me was the jaw. And I've heard a lot of different approaches to this, but my approach comes from my great teacher, George Garçon. He's made it a core principle in his teaching to drop the bottom jaw as you're playing to relieve tension. Now, when I studied with George, I think I took this a bit too far by thinking that dropping the jaw meant opening the mouth. Now, I don't want to speak for George Garçon, but what his concept has meant to me is to relax the jaw without necessarily opening your mouth. I don't have a good exercise for this other than to tell you to think about your jaw and whether it's relaxed or tense when you're playing. Again, we come back to the experimentation. The only way you're going to get a good sound is by experimenting and finding out what works for you. Now, other parts of the embouchure that you can experiment with to change your sound is how much lip you are using to cover the reed. In Dave Liebman's video, he talks about covering a bit more reed in the low register and a bit less in the top register, like a rolling motion off the lip as you're playing. So again, experiment and figure out what lip position works for you. You can also experiment with the positioning of the jaw. Are you moving it out or in? Again, very slightly, but try different positions and figure out what gives you the best possible sound. Now another quick note on saxophone embouchure is to make sure you're not biting up into the reed. If you put too much pressure onto the reed, you will limit its vibration and get a thinner sound. This has to do with both relaxing the bottom lip and the corners, but also the jaw and how much you open your mouth as you're playing. If you find that you have to squeeze on the reed to produce a sound, you might be playing a reed that's too hard. And if you find that any sort of movement or pressure up into the reed makes you squeak, you might be playing a reed that's too soft. This is yet another thing that you have to experiment with. Reed strength and tip opening of your mouthpiece will greatly affect how you're able to form your embouchure around it. Now for the final part of the puzzle. Tongue position, throat position, everything that happens inside your mouth, how you form the air before it goes into your saxophone. And this is perhaps where most of your saxophone sound is formed. And there are so many different approaches to teaching this. Some teachers will tell you to make the vowel sound ah into the saxophone, explained as a low tongue position and an open throat. I might be mistaken, but I think this comes from Joe Viola and passed on to players like George Garçon and Jerry Bergonzi. Now, Joe Viola was a student of Joe Allard's, but Joe Allard will tell you to say E into the saxophone. Students of Joe Allard include Michael Brecker and Dave Liebman. The E sound will give you a higher tongue position, and it will actually tether the sides of your tongue to your top teeth. Now, the vowel sound that I like to use when I play the saxophone is actually the Norwegian vowel sound for Y. E. It is very similar to E, except when you say E, the sides of your mouth lift up. When you say E, that turns into a frown. So the reason I'm teaching E instead of E has actually got more to do with the formation of the embouchure. But the key is to experiment with different vowel sounds and how they impact your sound. And again, this is not experimenting for an hour today and figuring out, oh, I'm gonna do E. This is about doing it consequently for many, many years, and over time you will find what works for you. So again, my approach is to say E, lifting the back of your tongue to a high position and tethering the sides of your tongue to the top teeth. This leaves the tongue in this position, which means I am tonguing with the very tip of my tongue, saying ta 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 ta. Now George Garçon, while I was studying with him, told me to tongue da, which means tonguing with a little bit further back on your tongue, like this, da 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 da. That might have something to do with his ah approach, which leaves the tongue in a slightly different position. But again, this just goes to show you that there are many ways to do things, and that my approach may not be right for you. So again, experiment and find out what works for you. Now finally, here are a couple of exercises to help you with finding the right saxophone voicing. Voicing simply means what you're doing with the back of your tongue and your throat to form the saxophone sound. And this is going to be different from low notes to high notes. This is going to be overwhelming at first. So let me break it down into some very simple exercises to help you get started and developing an awareness as to what you're doing with your tongue and your throat. First, let's do this Joe Allard exercise. Play a middle F on your horn without the octave key and then drop it down an octave. In order to do this, try to not change anything about the embouchure or the air support. Do it simply by changing the voicing, your tongue positioning and your throat positioning. It might take you a while to be able to do this, but do a little bit every day, and over the course of years, it's going to get so much easier. Now do this exercise chromatically down from F and all the way down to low B flat on your horn. This is a great way to get started on thinking about voicing because we're going down. If we start on the low note and try to voice it up, that is going to make a lot of people put tension in their embouchure and other places. But once you get comfortable with this, start working on your overtones. If you only take one thing away from this video, it should be to get this book, Top Tones for the Saxophone by Sigurd Rascher. It contains a lot of great exercises for saxophone voicing and saxophone sound. And I open up this book pretty much every day when I practice to do a couple of the overtone exercises he presents. I'm going to show you a couple of the most basic exercises in this book, and keep in mind that I'm using the voicing and not the embouchure to change the pitches here. Now I'm going to play a low B flat on my horn, and without changing the fingering, I'm going to make that sound like B flat an octave above. Now the next overtone you're able to produce from that low B flat fingering is an F, an octave and a fifth above that low B flat, or the fundamental as we refer to it in overtone practice. Then you can move on to playing the higher overtones. But again, stick with the basic stuff until you have control, because if you go up into the higher register too quickly, you might introduce tension. Now I have loads more exercises for saxophone sound, and I'm presenting them in a video series of shorts that you will find on my channel. So if you found this video helpful, hit that like button, and if you want more saxophone tips, then subscribe to my channel. And if you disagree with something or have a different approach, please let me know in the comments, because I'm sure a lot of people can benefit from your insight. We're all doing this slightly differently, and in the end, it's all about figuring out what works for the individual. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video.